wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers into the final stretch of the NFL 2022 draft season. And in this show, Keith has put together the Keith Myers final 4.0 mock draft of the season, and we're going to discuss it. So how you doing, Keith?
I'm doing good. We got about, a week and a half until draft day. It's just starting to get fun.
A week and a half? What? 3 days. 4 days.
Yeah, 4 days. I don't know. I'm off by a week. Everything's off by a week. We have 4 days until draft day.
4 days, yeah.
Yeah.
Three days by the time the show comes out. So, yep.
Yeah, so we are, we're right there. So I put together a mock draft for us. For today's show, and I thought we'd go through it and kind of look. It's a 7-round draft, and just look at the Seahawk picks and how all of that worked out.
Yeah. So I helped you out a little bit. I made a couple slides to help us get through this because, first of all, I wanted to talk about the trades that you made up front to kind of get this thing in motion. So let's put that up, and you can kind of walk through them with us.
Well, one of the things that when I went into this, that first trade with New Orleans was what this whole draft was going to be about. And that's, if you're New Orleans, you don't make the trade that they did with the Eagles to get that extra first round pick that's in the middle there unless you have a strategy, right? They made that trade a month ago for a reason. And the reason typically in that kind of situation is that they have a trade in mind. They have a trading partner in mind. And what will happen is if the player they want is available when the trading partner gets on the clock, they'll go through that prearranged trade. And that is what I looked at here is would the Seahawks be potentially that team that they would trade up for? And so to make that work, Seattle would trade back from 9 to 16. They would also get 19 overall and a 6th round pick, 194, which they don't have a 6th round pick. That's kind of why that one was included. And then New Orleans would get the 9th overall pick and the 41st overall pick. So, and it worked out pretty well. I don't know if the Seahawks would have to give up the 41st overall in order to make this work with New Orleans in real life, but within the draft simulating program that we use, it required it. So I went ahead and threw it in. Yeah.
Well, and it put you into the levels of the draft that you wanted to be in. And we still have a pick at 40. So you're still going to get some value there. And in addition to that, that 392 pick overall, 3rd round 92 pick kind of put us in a spot as well where we weren't before. So I like it. I like the strategy.
So that's the second trade. I traded down again from 9. So I had 16 and 19. I traded the 19th down to the 22nd. So I ended up picking at 16 and 22 and got that 92nd overall pick from the Packers. So that ends up with 10 total draft picks for the Seahawks, including 2 in the first round, 1 in the second, 2 in the third.
That seems about right. That seems like, John Schneider's going to leave this draft with 10 or 11 picks. And this is a good way to get there. So, all right. So I made a slideshow, and we'll see if it works because I normally don't make slideshows. So we're gonna try the slideshow.
Well, your first one worked, so we'll go with that.
Yeah, we'll try that. All right.
And then I also have all the information here. So we can talk about who is available, who wasn't, and all of that stuff.
Perfect.
As we get to each pick.
All right. Seahawks are on the clock at 16. And
at 16.
Here's the pick. All right.
Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. Probably the number 3 left tackle prospects. Got attitude, work ethic, everything that you'd want out of a left tackle. He's kind of a perfect one for Seattle in terms of he's a mauler. He's a good run blocker. He's a guy that Bill and I both really like, and he was sitting there, and this pick was really easy to do, especially at 16. It's good value. The other players that were kind of sitting there in that same range that were available weren't ones that I was excited about picking. And
was Jordan Davis by any chance sitting there?
No. Jordan Davis went 14 to Baltimore. Jermaine Johnson went 12 to Minnesota. So, yeah, I mean,
you can get yourself in a little bit of a trouble if you trade out of that 9, because you're gonna pass on a couple of these blue chipper guys at the top, and you're gonna get solid player in its place, but you're picking up additional value in the draft. I mean, that's kind of the idea.
Well, and I personally think Trevor Penning's a blue chipper, so I went with it. I thought that worked well.
And we've talked about that. I mean, he's just right there. And he's definitely the kind of player that I think Seattle likes. He's athletic, super athletic. And I think he just kind of fits the mold for the Seahawks going forward, kind of gives that team a little bit of an edge on offense, which they've been lacking since Marshawn Lynch left.
Yep.
All right. Let's go with the next one.
So the next pick's down at 22.
Let me see if I can get this to work, Keith. I know. Sorry. It shows it's working, but we're gonna try this.
It still says 16 from what I see. Okay, I'll just while you're playing with that, I'll go through and talk. So at 22nd, the 22nd overall pick, Treylon Burks, the wide receiver, just went at 20. Kenny Pickett just went at Treylon Burks went at 21. Kenny Pickett went at 20. Chris Olave went at 19, which is who the Green Bay Packers traded up to get their wide receiver that they needed after their big offseason trade. What that meant was that I had my pick of three cornerbacks of players that I wanted, and I went with Kaiir Elam, cornerback out of Florida.
I love that pick.
He's 6'2", 4.38 speed, ball hawk. Just there's very little not to like about him as a cornerback. His tape. People are worried because there seems like there's some concentration lapses, but I think that good coaching and good teammates, accountability, they can rein that in and get the most out of him. And so
I think he's the second most physical corner in this draft, next to Gardner, and one of the stickiest guys. I mean, he's a press man guy, can get up in your face, push you back a little bit. He's 196, 200 pounds, 6'2". He's got the length, and it shows up on the field. It's not like he's this guy that doesn't have the tools. He's got the length and the tools. He's kind of a ready-made guy. Somebody else in the draft, Woolen, later on, got similar length, even longer, athletic upside, but doesn't quite yet have the tool package yet. And that's why Elam's a great pick here. So tell me the strategy that you had in your mind where you wanted to get corner at in the first round, and you made a trade to get this pick as opposed to waiting into the second and third round for that.
Well, I made the trade because I thought that getting 2 first rounders was going to make it work, and having that trade partner of with the Saints trying to get up into 9 to get Malik Willis, which is what they did. They traded away 2 first round picks for the 9th overall pick to get their quarterback. It gave me an opportunity to get 2 good players. The left tackle is the biggest need on this roster right now, other than quarterback, but I'm not addressing quarterback because I don't like any of the quarterbacks in this draft. The second biggest need on this roster was corner, and Elam he's a an elite corner who probably on day one now is the best corner on this roster.
And he's 20 years old.
Yeah, he's only 20, super young. And it was a lot of value. I know that the Seahawks don't typically take corner early, but they did work out Sauce Gardner for a reason. Like if he's there at 9, they'll probably take him. And he wasn't there at 9. He went 5 overall. So the second best corner, well, no, maybe not second best, because Derek Stingley Jr. is probably the second best. But to me,
this have the length that the Seahawks like.
Yeah. To me, Elam is right there as the third. Maybe if you want to go, Trent McDuffie out of Washington is the third, and Elam is the fourth. But at that point, you're going to find disagreement amongst scouts, as those guys seem fairly equal. And the fact that I was able to get him at 22, it's a huge upgrade where the Seahawks need a massive upgrade. And so it just made a lot of sense to go ahead and pull the trigger there. And I was actually kind of glad that I did, because in the other spots in the draft, it didn't seem like there were cornerbacks that I liked that were good value. So it turned out that it worked out really well for me.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of going offensive tackle and cornerback. I think that those are two positions that you're going to look at in the first round. And you nailed them. The other one that's obvious is, defensive end, edge rusher. And if they're just not sitting there, or you don't feel comfortable with the talent there, maybe you want to go find somebody later on. Let's see what happens. So what's the next one?
All right. So the next pick is 40. And this one, depending on who you ask, this might be a bit of a reach, but I went with defensive lineman, pass rushing specialist, interior pass rushing specialist, PERRION WINFREY, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. This is a pick that
he's been on your radar for a long time.
Yeah, he has been. He's a guy that you and I both really like. I think that an interior pass rusher, someone who can get up the field, not coming around the edge, but just come right up the middle, split the guard and the center, and stop the quarterback from being able to step up away from the defensive ends, will really make that defense better. And that's who PERRION WINFREY is. He's a guy that rushes the passer up the middle. And I just think he's going to be one of those assets that the team really needs. And for him to get him at 40, I thought that was good. I probably could have traded down again and got him a little lower, but I wasn't willing to risk it. He was there, and he's a guy I wanted. Yeah.
And the other guy that's in the kind of the same pocket is Devontae Wyatt. Devontae Wyatt was more of a run stuffer at Georgia and needs to develop the pass rushing stuff, but he's got the tremendous athletic upside. This guy was more of the pass rush guy that's going to work on his the run a little bit, but he's even a bigger prospect than Wyatt is, and I think he's got it in him.
Well, and Wyatt went 25th to Buffalo in this draft. Right. And so that left me with the, he wasn't there, but there were other options.
This guy's so long too. I just like PERRION WINFREY as a prospect just because he has all the tools.
Yeah.
And I think he's kind of moldable a little bit. He really came out of the Senior Bowl as far as his mentality, wanting to be a leader on the defensive line and just kind of owning the offensive lines there in Mobile. That was kind of eye-opening for me with him. All right, Keith.
So after that, since there's only the one pick in round 2 because of the earlier trade, the Seahawks didn't pick again until 72 in this draft. And that's in round 3 overall. So in this one, I was stuck looking at this with a couple of guys that I really liked. And I had to pick one. That was harder to pick than I thought it was going to be. I ended up with Kenneth Walker III, the running back out of Michigan State. The Seahawks need.
I think this is the first time that we've talked about Kenneth Walker, I think, in this show.
So Kenneth Walker he's a guy with breakaway speed. He's got like that 4.42, I believe, speed. So he's got that
4.38.
4.38. So he's got breakaway speed, which one of the things the Seahawks liked about Penny when they drafted him was his ability to take a run, and if they give him a crease, he can turn an 8-yard run into an 80-yard run, and Walker can do that. And whereas the other guy, Spiller, which was the other running back that really fits Seattle's system, he's perfect for an outside zone running game, which Seattle likes to do, and those kind of things. He runs like a 4.6. I was surprised at
It was
his
disappointing.
It was really disappointing, and so I went with Walker, who's the speedier guy. Now that wasn't necessarily it's not necessarily a great pick for Seattle in terms of if they want someone who can, grind between the tackles the way Chris Carson used to, but they're becoming more of an outside zone team. And so Walker just kind of fits that, and they've got interior power on the roster. And so I just felt like it was a good fit. And yeah, Spiller's lack of speed just bothered me enough that I decided to pass on him and go with Walker the third, just because I think he's a better prospect because he's got those wheels to take things deep.
He's actually risen up to be, even passing Breece Hall in some boards, in some people's mocks. And Kenneth Walker the third is what you would describe as more of an elusive running back. As opposed to a power guy, but he has 5'10", 210 pounds. He could probably put on an additional 5 pounds, not lose too much athleticism. He's just shifty as can be, though. You watch him on film, he has very good instincts. He cuts, makes spin moves. Guys have a hard time getting their hands on him. He's kind of one of those guys. He's not going to be a guy that's a tackle breaker, although he does break tackles. But just not by sheer force. He's really kind of dances around a little bit while moving forward. And I like the pick. I think it's a good fit, especially if Rashad Penny only stays another year. This would be the guy to take over in 2023 for sure.
The Seahawks just need a running back. Like
they do.
The Carson Penny combo of always injured running backs, it's not a combo anymore. Like, I know they're both on the roster right now, but I don't expect that to be true in the season. They need a guy that's dependable. Neither of those other guys is dependable. Going and getting a running back in this draft, it seems to be a necessity, and so that's why he's on there.
Okay.
So you're going to love this next pick.
Okay.
Round 3, pick 92 overall, Channing Tindall, linebacker out of Georgia.
I do like that pick. That's a great value. That's that perfect spot where I'm glad you picked up that pick, because that's where you're going to get this guy.
It was part of the idea was that hoping that he would be in there. And honestly, you look at the people who came after that. Brian Asamoah II, the linebacker out of Oklahoma, went 97, 5 picks later. Is really the only one that I would have considered a good pick in that range. Otherwise, I probably would have been reaching if he had been gone, unless someone like, I don't know, Ed Ingram or someone dropped because Tindall got picked. But it was kind of that spot. This is a guy with incredible speed at linebacker. He's an outside linebacker. He's going to be, the weak side linebacker. He might play in the middle if the Seahawks go to a true 3-4. But the guy's just got incredible speed and his ability to get sideline to sideline. His coverage skills are excellent. He's the type of playmaker at linebacker that this team needs, given that they've lost Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright the last 2 years.
Do you see him playing more of an outside off the ball kind of role for the Seahawks then?
Yeah, I think
with that speed and use his speed at the in the old KJ Wright role, and with Brooks moving and his speed moving inside, because he's a little bigger and more of a thumper at the middle linebacker spot. And so basically, you end up with a tandem of Brooks and Tindall to replace Wagner and Wright. It just took a couple of years for them to get all the pieces. Yeah. This is a guy. I mean, when you talk about 4.47 speed, I think is where he was at the combine, and then he plays kind of like a safety almost. He can drop back into coverage. He really hits and thumps. But that's the speed. It's the sideline stuff, the agility. Pete Carroll's going to fall in love with a guy like this off the defending national champion Georgia defense. Home run hit, dude. Nice.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite picks of this draft. I'm not
Good
going to lie.
value. Best value.
So the next pick came in round 4, pick 109. And Kirby Joseph, the safety out of Illinois, he's a guy with a lot of scheme diversity. He can cover in the slot as a cornerback. He can drop back into coverage as a free safety and be a deep guy. He's a guy that can come up and hit people near the line of scrimmage. He was also the first of 4 straight safeties that were picked. The next 3 picks after Kirby Joseph were Nick Cross, Brian Cook, and Verone McKinley III. So they, first of 4 straight safeties, which I thought was weird.
Well, this guy's amazing. I mean, I think he's underrated, and he's really long. So he's like 6'1", 200, but he's got an 80-inch wingspan. And he runs, a 4.50 40, which is plenty fast for that size. He's scheme diverse. You mentioned that. I think he can play up in the box. He can also drop back for you into coverage, play a little bit of the big slot. He's going to be able to be in that too high thing. He's got enough recovery speed there. He can cover your tight ends and your running backs definitely more than adequately. And it's a great value in the 4th round. I think this is kind of where you look for these type of players, the Channing Tindalls and now the Kirby Josephs. They're utility Swiss Army knife kind of players in your defense, and I like it.
Yeah, and speed. I mean, that's one of the things this defense needs is to increase its overall team speed. And the Tyndall, Joseph, and Elam pick earlier, these are all guys with serious wheels. The defense got faster with those picks.
I can't even tell you how disappointed I will be if the Seahawks don't get faster out of this draft, because it's almost impossible. There are so many good players, both on offense and defense, that have 4.4 sub 4.4 speed. It's just crazy. So love to get a couple of guys like that. All right, here we go. What's next?
So the next pick is actually, I had 2 picks in a row in round 5. And just going in and knowing that I had those 2 picks in a row, first pick was Alec Lindstrom. He's a center out of Boston College. He's Zion, what's his last name? Johnson, is a higher ranked prospect, going to go probably in round 2. I think in this draft, he did go in round 2. Whereas Lindstrom is in round 5, but given that's a lot of value. It's a lot of picks between here and there to get a guy who can come in and play center. And we know that Fuller, who's currently the backup, is terrible. He's just not an NFL center. We saw that last year. They've got to upgrade the position, and Lindstrom does that for them. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say this guy just has the perfect size for what Seattle wants to do. We brought in Austin Blythe, the former Rams center, kind of the same sort of measurables at 6'3". He's Alec Lindstrom's 294, but he's super athletic. I think he ran a sub 5.0 40 at the combine.
Yeah, it was like 4.88.
Yeah, just kind of opened some eyes there, I think. As far as getting to the second level, being a student of the game, and good solid pick. I mean, he may not start right away because we do have Austin Blythe. We'll see how that goes, that competition. But I think that he'd be a guy that would be able to come right away, where you could say there's a competition. And he'd be in line next year when Blythe's contract's no longer around. And a guy kicks in.
He's a 5th round pick, so you don't expect him to start right away.
Exactly.
But I think he can develop into someone who you can really depend on. I mean, he's a little undersized, and that's not necessarily what you want in a division where you have to play a guy like Aaron Donald twice a year. But there's other ways that you can address that. And I just think that he's a guy that I like to just seem like good value.
If there's a player outside of Seattle's organization that you mentioned the most, is that guy. And I want him to go away, Aaron Donald. I just hear that name out of your mouth too many times a year as a deficit, as a thing that we're behind the 8 ball a little bit on as our franchise.
Every NFL team is.
I know.
He's so good. And I say that as a Seahawks fan who hates playing against him, but loves watching him when he's playing someone other than Seattle. He is so damn good.
We had talked about Zion Johnson earlier. Linderbaum's the other guy in the first round. Would you go back into the first round and get a guy like Linderbaum, which would be kind of the A+ grade in the center class of this draft, as opposed to waiting and getting value?
Well, to do that, you'd have to, I guess, if you traded 40 and another pick and moved up into like 31 or 32. Tyler Linderbaum went 31 to the Bengals in this draft. And his arms are a little short, and he's come off that injury in the bowl game. I'm just not sure I would take him there, especially given that they signed Blythe. I think they can wait in this and go ahead and get value rather than losing a pick to trade up and that kind of stuff. I mean, I guess if you wanted to go and try and get Tyler Smith out of Tulsa and convert him from guard to center, you could have done that. But PERRION WINFREY was just too important to get at 40 to make that move. So I just think for a night, they've got a tackle. Then they turn around here. They get the center. That's kind of the two offensive linemen that I want them to get in this draft, and it just kind of worked.
And you didn't without pressing. I mean, it just came to you, and that's kind of the way you want the draft to go, ideally. So that's good. All right, here we are, back to back
picks. So the very next pick, that was 152. This is 153, still in round 5. Michael CLEMONS, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M. This guy's a project. He is athletically freaky. He is not as productive as his athletic freakishness would suggest. But oh my God, the potential. This pick was out of potential. It was either going to be him or Isaiah Thomas, who's an edge player out of Oklahoma. Thomas is he's more well-defined, and you might get more production out of him at day one, but he's got a lower ceiling. CLEMONS just has that higher ceiling. We're picking in round 5.
Yeah. Why is he staying around? Why is he staying around until round 5? What deficits does he have in his game that Seattle needs to kind of work on?
He really needs to just develop his pass rush moves. He basically tries to win with speed and just get around people, but he doesn't bend around the corner the way you'd like him to. But he's got the ability to win with a bull rush. He's got the strength and size to do that. He's got the ability to use his hands and switch up and maybe come inside, set people up with an outside move and then come back to the inside, things like that. And he just doesn't do it. He just runs around the edge over and over and over again. And it's going to take time to develop him. He's got crazy athleticism, but he needs seasoning. He needs coaching. Yeah. And if they can coach him up, it's a really high potential. So I went ahead and made that move over a guy like Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah. I mean, this is just an embarrassment of riches because, a guy like this got 83-inch wingspan, 6'5", 270 pounds, ran a 4.62 40. I think he can probably get under 4.58 or something like that. I read someplace on another site. And it's just a guy to add to the pile, and I really like the idea of bringing these guys in. You had talked about how difficult it is to find guys that can set the edge in a 3-4, and this would be one of those guys. So he just kind of come in and see if he can work himself into a rotation. So I like it. Okay.
Cool.
Now the area of the draft we didn't have before the draft, and we had it after you made the trades.
Yeah, so pick 194, which is round 6. The Seahawks don't currently have a 6th round pick. Part of when I made that first trade, it was moving up and getting moving down, but also moving up from 41 into 19 to get that second first round pick. But the other nice thing about that particular trade was that it got me this one, because the Seahawks don't have a 6th round pick, and there's this pocket of talent in here that's worth considering and looking at. And if you can get it as a throw in for in a bigger trade, you got to do it.
Because as it stands now, the Seahawks pick at 154, and then they have to wait until the 7th round. like pick 229, right? So that's a big gap.
So in this draft, I went ahead and got Kevin Austin Jr., who's a wide receiver out of Notre Dame. He's kind of more of a weapon than a wide receiver, really not a polished route runner, but he's 6'2". He's got speed. He's really strong, good hands. Although on the deep balls, because he can get deep, he tends to let the ball come into his body a little more than I'd like, but that might be coachable because he doesn't do that in the shorter passes. It's just for some reason when he's going deep, he likes to do that. So I don't know. It's just at 6th round pick. Plus, this guy's with his size and speed, he's an instant special teams contributor.
Mm-hmm. And he's another guy with wingspan. I mean, here's a wide receiver at 6'2", 209. He's got an 80-inch wingspan. You know, so he's just arms, and he can just go up and get stuff. High point. As soon as he learns how to do that, you mentioned that deficiency in his game. Yep. He could end up being your 4th wide receiver and just kind of specialist to go down and get some red zone targets and all that kind of stuff. Plus, he's one of those teams
with the physical attributes. There's nothing stopping him from becoming a number 2 wide receiver after a couple of years. If he's coachable and if he's trainable, because the deficiencies in his game aren't he's not fast enough, or he's not big enough, or he can't jump high enough, or he just gets beat physically. None of those things are true. He needs to learn how to get the ball at its highest point instead of waiting for it to come down to him, and things like that, which you can coach those things. And I think that it's a good spot for him, and he should be able to, do that. And there's no pressure on him to perform right away because he will be this team's 5th wide receiver.
Yeah, I like it. So most projections having him go, at the back end of the 6th, the early 7th. So getting him at 194, you kind of get a jump on that and ensure that you've got him in here. We've talked about him before and mocked him a couple different times, and I just think he's kind of a perfect fit in that area of the draft where guy needs some work, but he's got all the athletic upside that you could ever want. And you bring him in, you kind of see what he's all about. I think it's perfect. All right.
Yeah. And then, so then after that, we're just down in around 7. I went with Trey Turner, wide receiver out of Virginia Tech. This guy got a lot of long speed. He's a deep threat, not much else. Really a developmental project who, again, can contribute on special teams right away. He might not make the roster right away. He might end up in the practice squad initially, especially with having taken a receiver just before that. But this was one of those, you look at the guys and you're like, okay, of the people who are left, who's the one who's most likely to make the roster because of special teams ability? You're picking in round 7. You're not getting a starter. Maybe at least not right away, right? So pick a guy with upside and his ability to contribute to special teams right away, and that's where I went with Trey Turner.
Nice. Yeah, you could have gone, a few different ways: safety, corner, developmental quarterback, another offensive lineman to work on. You could always use a tackle or whatever, a kicker. I mean, you could have gone a lot of different ways. I was curious about the back-to-back wide receivers, but I get it. It's just one of those best athletes available picks almost, and you get that guy.
I looked for Cade York, who's the best kicker in this draft and probably the only draftable one. He went the last pick around 6 to the Jaguars. As far as like safeties and that kind of stuff. So, you're looking at like Jacoby Durant, who's a cornerback out of South Carolina State. Maybe one of the linebackers, Percy Butler, the safety out of Louisiana Lafayette.
Which they have brought him in.
Yeah.
To look at. Yeah.
And so there were some other options. The wide receiver was mainly just, I was like, out of all of the options that are here of guys that are still available, which one do I like the best, regardless of who I just picked? And that's why I went with Trey Turner.
I think it makes total sense to me. I think it makes sense to everybody.
So what do you think overall of my draft?
So there's the overall draft, the Keith Myers 2022 mock draft. So I totally get the Trevor Penning trade down pick. I think that's tremendous. I would have been disappointed if we trade down to 16, which is really kind of the back end of where I would want to trade down, and then nobody was available. Say Trevor Penning happened to come off the board early, and then you're sitting there floundering a little bit. You've got Jordan Davis is off the board, Jermaine Johnson's off the board. Everybody that fell out of the, into the teens is kind of working their way off the boards, and you're just kind of stuck a little bit. And then you find yourself maybe even needing to trade down a little bit more just so that you don't overextend, or you're reaching for somebody. That's my worst fear in this draft. So having Trevor Penning there for that pick was perfect. Kir Elam is one of my favorite picks in this draft. I watched him for probably 20 minutes this afternoon on a highlight reel, and he's just a playmaker. He's a guy that's a ball hawk. He knows how to read the quarterback. He's very tight in coverage. He's got all the physical tools and traits to be your number one lockdown corner, and I think that's his role in Seattle. So I'm really excited to get both those picks. Wasn't expecting to have 2 picks in the first round, so that's a great pocket of the draft there, where players just weren't available in any other mock that I think that we did. The PERRION WINFREY pick, obviously we've talked about that many times. Kenneth Walker surprised me. I was like, wow, there's a player, a running back in a position of need that we really haven't talked about very much. I was kind of excited to talk about him. Channing Tindall's value all over that. That could end up being the best pick in the draft long term. KIRBY Joseph, add to the pile of all the safeties, super athletic. Alec LINDSTROM could end up being the starting center long term after this year. Michael Clemens project, Austin Turner, and Turner to round it out. It's a great pick. I would not be disappointed with those 10 players out of the draft, especially at the top. The top 4 or 5 guys make the draft for sure. What do you think?
Well, I was really pleased with the way this draft fell. PERRION WINFREY felt like a reach, but I didn't care because he's one of my favorite players. And it's something that this team really needs. And there was just a lot of I thought you were gonna get me for not getting an edge rusher earlier. I really didn't. But I got an interior rusher with the idea that you've got
next year's draft too.
Well, and you've got a couple of edge players on the roster that will be significantly more productive if there's an interior presence to come in and get up the middle and just make it so the quarterback can't escape. And that's what I went with there. But I did think you ding me on that one. I don't know.
Yeah, the Elam pick makes up for it. That's where you would have tried maybe to get one of those premier guys, and it just fell that way. And then so by the time you're picking WINFREY and Walker and Tindall, you've got some choices there maybe, but then you're reaching a little bit. It really depends on how the draft falls for the Seahawks. I do expect them to draft an edge. We obviously did in Michael Clemens with this draft. But if they want somebody that's going to have an impact right away, it's going to be in the top 2 picks or 3 picks.
But I think with offensive tackle and cornerback, they just have bigger needs. And so I went with that. The other thing is Michael Clemens reminds me of Alton Robinson, who was picked in the 5th round a couple of years ago. Good things happen when he's on the field. He's a guy that has made an impact the last 2 years and is just making a case that he deserves more playing time, but it's taken, some time and some development for him to show that. And Clemens
he's one of those guys that could benefit from PERRION WINFREY being in there.
Oh, he will. He was one of the guys I was referring to.
Yeah.
And so, that's where I like that pick, but overall, I like this draft. This isn't where I went through and did 10 drafts and sent you the one that I like the most. I literally did 1 draft and sent it to you. And it fell really nicely for me.
Yeah, I like it. It did. Like I said, I'd be happy. I can't believe this thing's right on us right now. I know you said a week and a half earlier, but you were definitely in a fog. We're just a few days away.
It feels like a week and a half for me because I have a lot of stuff that I've got to do in the next couple of days before I fly down and see you because we are going to be together on for all 3 days of the draft down in Phoenix. So that'll be a blast.
That'll be a lot of fun, actually. Okay, so let's get out of here. Thanks for putting all that together, Keith. I appreciate the work ahead of time. You can find Keith on Twitter at MyersNFL. You can find me at NWChawk. You can find the show. Find us on your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and share it if you like it. So until next time, go Hawks.
Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWChawk, Keith is at MyersNFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.